Okay. All right. Boa tarde. Good afternoon to everybody. Buenas tardes. It is a great honor for the WBEH Chair of Irish Studies and the Brazilian Association of Irish Studies to open Poesia ao Meio-Dia with so many distinguished guests, foremost poets, translators, and authors. On behalf of Mariana Bolfarini, President of ABEI and General Editor of ABEI Journal, and myself, Coordinator of the WBEH Chair, welcome you all and thank Professor Manuela Palacios Gonzalez and Professor Gisele Volkov for organizing such a beautiful tribute in memoriam to the acclaimed poet Evan Boland. Poetry at Midday is a monthly live online encounter of lovers of poetry under the direction of Susan Lennon-Hoy, who delights her audience with her passionate poetry readings and selected music. She cannot join us today, but she will certainly enjoy seeing the recording of the poet's readings on the YouTube that will be available by the end of today. Now I invite Rachel Fitzpatrick, Consul Deputy of the Consulate General of Ireland in São Paulo, to open the event of the pre-launch of the ABEI Journal on such a special date that marks 2 years of Evan Boland's untimely death. So welcome, Rachel, and welcome all of you to this session.
Thank you so much, Professor Lara, for the kind introduction, and good afternoon to everybody. My name is Rachel Fitzpatrick. I'm the Deputy Consul General in Sao Paulo, and I'm really honoured to be with you all today for this really special opportunity to celebrate the life and the work of this outstanding poet and distinguished academic, Evan Boland, who is remembered internationally for attracting new audiences to Irish poetry, for making it a world for women. Colleagues online are much more expert in her life and work and will speak to it with greater eloquence than I can. So I will just touch briefly, if I can, on the impact her work had on me personally when I first encountered it as a Leaving Cert student, as so many do. I was really blown away for the first time to read Irish poetry centred on women's experiences. Work which explored the same themes as so many of our greats, Irish history, nationhood and identity, but that focused also on the family and marriage, that documented the lives of the silent and that showed beauty in the ordinary, making it very clear to 17-year-old me that the personal is political. And the more over the years that I kind of delved into her poetry, the more I admired her radicalism and her commitment to fight for the voices of women and other marginalised people. Boland was the youngest child of a Irish diplomat and first ambassador to the UK. So she spent her formative years abroad, and consequently I've always found her poems display a real empathy with what she called emigrant grief. And it's something that me and my colleagues try to remember and better understand in our own interactions with the diverse communities that we as diplomats engage with abroad. The Department of Foreign Affairs itself was honoured to work with her in 2018 when she was commissioned to write a poem commemorating Irish women casting their first ballot in 1918. Our future will become the past of other women. And my colleagues and I, male and female alike, we were all very moved by that at the time. And before this hosting, I was working in Liberia in the embassy there, where a huge focus of Ireland's work was on democracy, strengthening democracy and women's participation in electoral processes. So her words are with me in polling stations in Liberia, talking to first-time female voters there and female candidates. And they're with me today as we move into this important election year in Brazil. But enough about me. I would really like to welcome wonderful poets to our Poesia ao Meio-Dia hoje. We have with us Keith Payne, Moya Cannon, Mary O'Malley, Celia Dufresne, Catherine Phil McCarthy, Gina O'Brien, Pio Dorgan, Mary O'Donnell, Mairead Maeve and Josie Gaydon. I would love to speak to each of your achievements individually, but suffice to say what the viewers want is to hear your thoughts and your readings. So please allow me to welcome you and to thank you ever so much for joining us. I hope that in the period to come, we can welcome some of you to Brazil in person and indeed welcome some of you back who've already been here. Before moving on, I'd like to thank Professor Laura and the WBEH chair which continues to promote Irish literature in Brazil in such an innovative way and to facilitate a really rich study environment for USP students and the wider Irish Studies family here. I'd also like to thank ABEI, whose journal continues to be such a valuable resource. It's a delight to be able to pre-launch this 23rd edition, the special issue on Ivan Boland. I can't wait to have it in my hands and devour it. The embassy and consulate are delighted to be able to support the chair and ABEI. In our new strategy for the Latin America and Caribbean region, we commit to expanding Irish studies across Latin America. Both of you are such key partners on this, and we really look forward to working with you in the years ahead. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce our wonderful guest editors of this special edition. Manuela Palacios Gonzalez is Professor of English at University of Santiago Compostela in Spain. She has directed 5 research projects on contemporary Irish and Galician literature that have been funded by the Spanish Ministry of Science and the European Union. She has edited and co-edited several books in relation to this, including Migrant Shores and Antologia de Poesia Galega Nova, and has published translations of European and Arabic poetry and fiction, Shakespeare's Richard III, and articles on eco-criticism. Giseli Gangione-Volkoff is Associate Professor at Fluminense Federal University in Rio. She is the author of 3 solo books of poetry and has organized and translated anthologies, among other publications. She is a member of the Centre for Translation and Creation at UFEFE and the Group for Adaptation and Translation Studies, and is coordinator for the FAPERGI-funded project Culture and Arts in the Southern region of Rio, Marine History. Manuela and Giseli, muito obrigada, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Deputy Consul General, and good afternoon to our audience in Ireland and in Spain. Good afternoon, we may already say, to our colleagues and friends in Brazil. I would like to thank Professor Laura Ferra from the chair of W.B. Yeats, and also Mariana Bolfarini of the ABEI Journal, and my dear and very patient co-editor Giselle Wolkoff for letting me join them in the edition of this special issue honoring Ivan Boland's poetry. Today it is the turn of the poets to read the poems that they have written for this homage to Ivan Boland. But let me say that we are amazed at the number and quality of the contributing poets. Not all of them can be with us today because of other commitments, but most have been able to join us. Also, thanks to the acute perceptiveness of the ABEI Journal and my co-editor, Giselle Wolkoff, all possible efforts have been made to include an army of translators from Portugal, Brazil, and Galicia. In fact, recent publications on contemporary Irish poetry insist on the urgency to translate more Irish poetry to Romance languages, among others. Our thanks then to the translators who participate in this special issue. Regarding the academic articles, let me simply announce that we have gathered some of the most influential scholars on Ivan Boland worldwide. And I say worldwide literally, because we have scholars from Canada, New Zealand, Japan, Mexico, Spain, France, Germany, and Ireland, of course, who approach the analysis of Boland's poetry from the cutting-edge fields, such as, for instance, new materialisms, think theory, animal studies, eco-criticism, etc. But let's go now to the readings of the poetry, and we'll begin with Keith Payne, who is a poet, translator, and editor, and he has published 7 collections to date of original poetry and poetry in translation. And he currently shares his time between Dublin and Vigo in Galicia. He has set up the program La Malunte Readings, bringing Galician poets to read in Ireland and Irish poets to read in Spain. And he's going to read his translation of a Galician poet, Yolanda Castaño, and her poem about what should a woman poet look like. Keith, whenever you are ready.
Very good. Thanks very much. Muchas gracias Voilà, and also thanks to the co-editor Giselle and to Laura for not only arranging this evening and this journal, but also for continually and consistently showing what is gained in translation. I'm going to read this poem by Yolanda Castaño in my English translation. It's called Story of Transformation. And just the only thing to say about it is that the refrain that beauty corrupts, I was thinking today, could be read in light as to what supposedly was the stuff of the poem. So, Story of the Transformation. And as I said earlier, I have to run afterwards to another event. I wish you all a great evening. Story of the Transformation. Disorder, hurtful restraint. As a kid, we were poor and had less than nothing. Rickety Indians before I want grief. Horrible of complexity. Ghost. You know, it is as dark to miss it as it is lamented. Coral shadows, shattering pearls. Began as a slippery gill whose passing breath left me destitute. The plain matter not a whit. I neither grow nor sow. Got it? You don't. Renounce it, comply, swallow. A maelstrom raven sky of eternal cold judgment, a set nuns, like all the rest, each one a lesbian or anorexic, the letter bet into the blood, the hands, the head, conscience, the cunt. I shut my eyes and hoped beyond hope to become, but beauty corrupts. Beauty corrupts. Coral shadow, squandering pearls. Day breaks conquering, and there's boding in its gullet. You fool, bedeviled with box ticking and not what they held inside. It was an idle, giddy burst of flowers in winter. The rivers leaped back to themselves, and pink waterfalls, butterflies, and snails born from my hair. The smile of my breasts fueled airplanes. Beauty corrupts. Beauty corrupts. My supple belly, guided by spring, whelks spilled over my tiny hands. High praise pinched my heart, and I didn't know what to do with all that light in the shadow. They said, your weapon would be your punishment. They spat my virtues in my face. In this club, we won't have girls with scarlet lips. A vicious tide of filth gaining interest that has nothing to do with my mascara. The mice burrowed into my room and dirtied the linen drawers. Liters of scrap pitch lurking secretly. Liters of control, liters of mud slingers, kilos of suspicion raised, and with just the arc of my eyebrows. We should be hogtied, stained grey and all trace erased with acid. Renounce who I am just to write? They skinned me alive, my long, tapering neck. For the hair that springs from the nape. In this club, we won't have girls who strut. We don't trust summer. Beauty corrupts. Make bloody sure it's worth it. Yolanda Castaño. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to continue first by thanking again all present and all poets who generously sent us their poems and those who can be here today. And I would like to say a few words. I wish I could say many, many words about Moya Cannon, But this is just a highlight. When the journal is on, you can all see the biodatas. She's been the editor of Poetry Ireland Review and director of the International Writers Course at the National University of Ireland in Galway. And her collected poems, published by Carcanet Press, Manchester, 2021, brings together poems from 6 previous collections. So I'll pass on the word to you, Moya. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Gisela, and many thanks to you and to Laura and Mariana and Manuela for your work in bringing this together. I'm sure Yvonne would be absolutely thrilled. She was such a generous and important presence for us all, and as Rachel said, working for a world for women. When I was asked to contribute to this journal, I thought that the following poem might be suitable because it relates to the women we don't know whose opinions we never hear. It's called the Countermounting Order, and the Countermounting Order was an order sent out by Owen McNeill, the Commander-in-Chief of the Irish Volunteers, on Easter Sunday, 1916, so just a little over a century ago. And its aim was to prevent a countrywide rising planned by a secret military committee and comprised of Patrick Pearse and Thomas MacDonagh and Thomas Clarke and many others. And he wasn't actually a pacifist, but he felt that the Irish volunteers were not armed and there would be widespread slaughter. And my connection with it was that my grandfather was a member of the Irish Volunteers. He was heading off to Dublin to fight for his country, and he received this countermanding order. And as children, we were very, very disappointed that he didn't continue on and go off to the great rising in the General Post Office and become a hero. But even as a child, I used to wonder what my grandmother thought about all of this, because he received the countermanding order and he'd headed off in his little pony and trap, his little not quite a cart, but something similar. He headed off and came back a few hours later. And there's only a tiny bit of family lore about it. And as I said, I was thinking of it recently, watching all those Ukrainian women saying goodbye to their men who all had to go off to be heroes. And I would love to see a world where women didn't have to make those goodbyes and where young men did not have to be heroes. So this is the Countermanding Order, 1916. And my young grandmother, what of her? Was she too dejected? No documentary evidence exists. My mother, too young at 7 months to remember herself, used to tell us. She heard the horse and trap in the yard again and couldn't believe her ears. What was my grandmother doing? Did she clear away a half-eaten Easter dinner, talking distractedly to her 2 little boys as she scraped jelly from a glass bowl? Did she mix feed for hens or pigs? Or wonder about bringing cattle in for milking? Did she pray or take out her handwork? Was she putting the baby down for her rest? Only hours earlier, in the swept farmyard, she had said goodbye to her husband of 6 years, her exiled lover of 7 more, whose letters had been carried in steamships across Caribbean and Atlantic tides. On this Sunday morning, had they embraced as he headed for the muster at Dungannon, as he enjoined her to bring up the children as good Catholics and good Irish men and Irish women. My mother in old age was to remark with a raised eyebrow, wasn't it a bit cool of him all the same? Now, as the trap clattered in through the gate and the horse, Rebel, halted in his familiar place, did my young grandmother wipe her hands in her apron? Did she rush to the door? Although the rising had been called off, although the great cause seemed lost again, did her heart not rejoice? Obrigada.
Thank you very much. Okay. And now we proceed with our next poet, Mary O'Malley, who has published 9 books of poetry, including Valparaiso. She's been a writer in residence at the National University of Ireland in Galway and held the chair of Irish Studies in Villanova University in Philadelphia. Anyway, you'll again be able to see her long biodata when the journal is on. Please, Mary O'Malley, the floor is yours, and thank you. You are muted. We can't hear you yet.
Ok. Can you hear me? Ok, muito obrigada,
Yes.
Gisele e todos. Ok.
Mary, could you open
Thank you
your
very much.
video camera? Mary, could you open your camera?
Yes?
She has her camera on.
Yeah, I have. I'm on an iPhone.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
that's it. It's okay. Thank you.
It's not very good. Okay. Because my computer let me down. Muito obrigada por todos e por tudo a todos. And particularly to Manuel and Giselle and Professor Lara, and also to the embassy and the consul. It was lovely to hear from you. It was lovely to hear somebody who had encountered Yvonne Boland on her Leaving Cert course, actually. Because Yvonne, one of her great, among her many gifts, was teaching, and she was a wonderful teacher, and I should know because I met her when I was a very new poet. And I was exceptionally lucky that she took an interest in my work and we kept in touch, and you would now call it mentoring, but we then just called it keeping an eye on me and giving advice, and including arranging, I suppose, for me to go to the publisher I'm still with, Corconet. She was a very generous woman and very exacting, and I benefited from her conversations, with the result that when she died suddenly during the pandemic, I was stunned. And I think I'm only fully coming to grips with that now. And that's another reason to thank you for this event and for the magazine. It was Yvonne that said to me when my own father died, and I was very close to him, she said, never underestimate the size of the absence. And I was thinking about her words today. Her own absence is a very large one. This is a poem I wrote directly after hearing she died. I hadn't written a poem in a while. I was working, and I just went outside. Somebody phoned me. I went outside, and when I came in, I wrote this poem. It's called Wolf Song. Sit still now. Take up your pen. In this space before noise begins, things with traces. Now she too is becoming history. Already the first slow movement of the strings is parting the silence. This is the point in the story when shadows thin as blades quiver in the April air. You can see the wolf through them. Soon he too will be gone, forgotten. This long free walk by the sea, a detour. The sea will remember him. When he licked my hand at the hawthorn, his traces sharpened the salt air.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
I would like to continue now with our next poet, Celia Dufresne. It's a lovely thing to have you with us today. So thank you for joining, for sending us the poem. Celia Dufresne writes in many genres, in both Irish and English, and she has many awards as well. In 2020, she was shortlisted for the Irish Book Awards, and she has a few new collections coming out soon. So I'll pass on the word to you, Sia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Giselle, is that okay? You can hear me? Thank you, Giselle and Manuela, for including me in this fabulous anthology. It's wonderful to be included in the ABEI journal and to be here today as part of this launch. This poem that I'm going to read, it's quite a recent one, and I find that in some of my more recent poems, I'm revisiting my childhood. And this one, as the dedication says, is in memory of Evan Boland, who meshed womanhood and nationhood. And it's about essentially how, as a child, I was exiled in the south of Ireland from my family in the north. And we had to leave the north. And I grew up actually in the house, Moya, from which the Countermounting Order was sent, as it happens. So, well, that's the only claim to fame that particular house has, and it was something that always intrigued me, though I haven't written about it as of yet. So I shall read this poem, and speaking of translation, it was written in Irish originally. It's called Cart Dúchais in Irish, and this is the translation into English. Birthright. You often think of what you left behind. There was your family, of course, aunts and uncles, in time cousins, and for a time grandparents. You wonder now, did those grandparents miss you? If they did, they never said. You know what it is to be separated from a grandchild. You know the longing for that small person. You think of all you might teach her. You think that time is running out. Your grandparents may have thought that about time, but may have been reluctant to teach you how to survive, though you may have learned from their example how to unravel parts of a cardigan that weren't threadbare and knit them into a new garment, how to fashion sheets from flour bags. You remember a peddler would call with tapers to light the wicks in the gaslights. Others would bring fish, fresh fruit, bottles of fizzy drinks. Your grandmother would mix one of the cordials with a second liquid and create a drink to build you up. It tasted strange. You drank it nonetheless, not knowing it was part Guinness. You left those days and more behind. You left the smell of the sea, the cold of the granite beneath your bottom as you watched the pirogues, the slipperiness of the moss beneath your feet at the bathing place around the back of the quarry. You brought with you tales of the quarry, of how it was bottomless, how a girl you knew fell over the edge once and her dress caught in a splinter of rock that held her until she was rescued. You know that story is true. You also know the quarry was formed when granite to build the pier was hewn from it. A simple explanation, one that makes sense, more so than the other story you bring with you, the story of your leaving. Thank you very much, Gurmila Mahati.
No, thank you very much, Sia. We pass on the word to Manuela. You are muted, Manuela. We cannot hear you.
Sorry, yes, thank you. I keep forgetting that in spite of all the time we have been doing this anyway. So Eileen Hulinen does not need an introduction, but just let me say briefly that she was Ireland professor of poetry from 2016 to 2019, and that she has published 11 collections of poetry. The latest, The Mother House, which received the Irish Times Poetry Now Award in 2019. And today we were talking a lot about translations and the need for more translations. And she has published translations of poetry from several languages. And she was also one of the 4 founding editors with her late husband, Macdara Woods, and also Piers Hutchinson and Leland Bardwell of the literary magazine Cyphers, and remains its principal editor. The floor is yours, Aileen.
Thank you. I've had to move away from the screen because my printer has let me down. Thank you very much to Manuela and Gisela and to Laura, it's lovely to see you all. Thanks so much for bringing me into this tribute to Ivan Boland. I wrote this poem as a result of the invitation, because one of the things that I would pick up from time to time in her work as a sort of something that surfaced every now and again was her interest in visual art and women artists. And I wanted to write about a friend, Helen Maloney, a stained glass artist who she made stained glass for many churches in Ireland. But whenever she got a commission, she would have a problem finding an idea. Where was she going to start? She would send £10 to the nuns, to the poor Clares in Ballsbridge. And the idea was that they would pray and then she would get an idea. So the poem is called A Shadow in Her Notebook. Helen Maloney, stained glass artist, 1926 to 2011. She sent a £10 note to the poor Clares and imagined them in their brown habits praying for her to find an idea. That was a start. They sent her a fish, swimming and wavering, its head enormous in the dark water. They sent her a lion, then a star. She drew the lines of lead that held the sun in its place, that funneled the light through what was once the open air. The clouds paused on the mountain top, a gleam of weather somewhere else, then the storm pounding overhead before it slid off northward, a dark prowl. The lion raised his paw, colored like the sun, glowing now against a glass curtain. Such a blue, it seemed a kind of night. The darkened interior sucked in colors. Always the voice in her head objecting. But could it not just be clear glass? No, the shadow of the bell tower, the woman dressed in brown, a shadow behind a screen. They gathered around her clean white page, demanding indigo glass for the narrow, tight window, and oyster white, a little off-center for the loaf. Just there on the border between the storm and the hush, the fish trembled in the light from the clouded sky, weaving like a hologram. On her page, the same tremble through a swimming shadow that covered the chancel floor. Only the blind organist's daughter will ever see how it shivers, floated safe in empty air. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aileen. And our next poet is Catherine Phil McCarthy. Her poetry collections include Daughters of the House, The Invisible Threshold, Sun Trap, The Blue Globe, This Hour of the Tide, and also a novel, One Room and Everywhere. And she is a former editor of Poetry Island Review from 1998 to 1999, and also received the Lawrence O'Shaughnessy Award for Irish Poetry in 2014. So, Catherine, whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Manuela and Giselle and Laura. It's a real honor to be here and to read with my colleagues. I met Yvonne Boland in my first year of living in Dublin. During the academic year before, in 1985-86, I lived in London and poems came into my life. That September of 1986, I switched on the radio one morning and heard an interview with Yvonne. What struck me is that I was hearing a poem, Misha Era, I Am Ireland, from the inside out, with the curiosity of a maker of poems for the first time in my life, tuned to the voice of the speaker rather than as a casual listener. I am the woman in the Gansey coat, on board the Mary Bell, in the huddling cold, holding her half-dead baby to her as the wind shifts east and north, who neither knows nor cares that a new language is a kind of scar. Something to do with the charged energy and candor of her live reading voice, as well as the figures in the poem standing for Ireland and the lament for a lost language lodged with me. I sat in her workshop 6 months later, an evening class in creative writing in the spring of 1987 in Dundrum Library, I think it was, and her comments on the poems of others from week to week gave me a vocabulary to speak about the process of making a poem, of crafting it, a glimpse also of what it was to have a writing life, because I had for almost 10 years worked in education at that point, and suddenly here was the living poet. It was the first of several workshops, readings and lectures in UCD and in the Irish Writers' Centre that I had attended and for which I'm grateful. And my thanks especially to you three, Giselle, Laura and Manuela. And this is Magic Circle, and it remembers the first occasion on which I met Yvonne, which was in her own home. That was following the workshop. Magic Circle. She gave me a book in the sitting room with light pouring in and mountains I've seen in all weathers. Leafless winter, the fire banked with red coals, air so chill, our breath is fog, and overnight snow patching grey slopes. Time came full circle that afternoon in summer, when the tortoise raised the hair and the crab moved sideways across an ocean floor. The children went out, left us to the quiet of a house, the sun still high, and no sign of day drawing to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Our next poet is Jean O'Brien, and she has 6 full collections of poetry published. Her latest just published this February, and the title is Stars Burn Regardless, published by Salmon Poetry. She has won a number of awards, including the Fish International Poetry Award and the highly prestigious Avon International Poetry Award in the United Kingdom. So the floor is yours, Jean, whenever you are ready. Jean? She was here with us a few minutes ago. So, hello, Jean. Maybe
Jean is here, but I think that the micro is closed. Can you?
All right.
Não.
Jean, you are muted. Can you unmute?
E eu não consigo desmutar ela. Oh my God.
Yes, Moya? Oh, because there's a raised hand. No, all right.
Sorry, I was trying something in the corner of my screen rather than where I should have been. I'm ever so slightly different. Sorry about that. Listen, thank you so much to Manuela and to Laura and to Giselle and everyone in the ABEI journal, which I'm absolutely delighted to be included in. And anything involved in Ivan, I'm always honoured, and especially today on her anniversary. And, you know, I'm just so proud to have been asked. And I first met her in a workshop that they were doing in Trinity College, and she was hugely nurturing and encouraging and giving us nourishment. And in the same workshops, I must also mention Paula Meehan, who also did the same for me. And those two women really set me on my road. Whether I should have been set on it or not, now is another matter, but they did. And the poem I'd like to read that I wrote is called Sustenance. And it borrows some lines from a poem that Ivan herself wrote in the book Coda, if anyone has the book, and it's the last poem in it, and she dedicated the poem to Michael Hartnett. So I open my poem with a few lines from it to Michael Hartnett, and there's just one thing I have to explain, and I'm probably the worst person to be trying to pronounce this. It should be someone like Elaine Quillinan or Celia or Theo. It's the Irish word for a Monaghan Turum, which is a keener. It's a woman who cried at funerals, at Irish funerals, who sort of wailed and expressed the family's grief. So this was her Irish name. In English, we know them as keeners. So I will proceed. Sustenance. You made the noise for me, made it again until I could see the flight of it. Dan Boland from Coda. She was my Monaghan Turin, feeling our language for me, showing its range, its flight path, parsing our phrases, sloughing off the old tropes, with a voice like the echo of a summer song, tuned somewhere deep, reverberating in pavements and city streets, in the gathering shadows of granite buildings, in the road of Anna Livia. I heard the cry, saw the flight, saw noise stitch the sky, and tried to hold it like a wayward running kite. String unscrewing in my hands, leaving me raw and grounded. My back to the wind, I held on tight, but often missed the bridle points as it pivoted and plunged in my mind's sky.
Thank you very much, Jean. And now, Giselle, it's your turn.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Manuela. And I'd like to introduce our next poet, Pio Dorgan. He's from Cork, but it's in Dublin. And he is a poet, a novelist, a prose writer, a documentary screenwriter, editor, translator, broadcaster, and his latest collections are also translations from other poets and his own poems in Italian. So with us, Pio Dorgan, please. And thank you for joining. You are muted.
No, that's better, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Boa tarde, boa tarde. Obrigado, Professor Laura, Gisele, Manuela, querida Manuela. Of course, it's such a great pleasure to be in such good company. A word of warning, I'm speaking from the Aegean, where despite the many gifts this place brings me, one of them is not a reliable Wi-Fi signal, so I may disappear at any time. I was so touched, Rachel Fitzpatrick, to think of you, an Irish woman diplomat in Liberia, with the spirit of Ivan informing your passion, our common passion for democracy, how she would have relished the fact, but also the word itself, Liberia. Liberia, such freedoms Ivan has brought us by her example, her courage, her path breaking, her path making, and what a lovely tribute to her ongoing influence this is. I'll just read a poem. That's enough talk. It's called Revenant. Silence is settling on the green, on paths, on redolent shorn grass. Midsummer gloaming is a pale screen above bordering trees heavy with leaf, and in the houses of the square, yellow lights, blue flicker of televisions, silence. Suburban estate fallen quiet, nobody out there walking a dog, no teenagers loud in premonition of sex, caught in all that fizz and fall of the blood fever, that lovely push and shove of the tribe, posture and doubt, that remembered heady mix. None of that, not even a car passing, the small children all in bed. I turn to the blue glow of night work, emails to be answered, documents edited, the long day to tidy away. I save, stretch, turn in my chair, and there you are, still and composed, looking away out at the world, hand flat on the blank page, the open notebook. But you cannot see out now. Night has made a black mirror of the window. All you can see is your own face staring back from wherever you have gone. I know that I will not catch your eye, that a call or shout from the street will not startle you, nor the cry of a hungry child, nor a voice raised in farewell or sudden fear. You are beyond all that, beyond, and yet here you are, perfectly self-contained as ever, a natural presence at home here in this room your living presence never knew. Nothing I do or say now can disturb you. You have gone into that dimension where time itself is outside history, and you with it.
Thank you very much, Pio Dorgan. And our next guest would be Mary O'Donnell, but I think she's still about to arrive. And so I'll pass on the word to Manuela, and then maybe when she shows up, we'll get back to her.
All right. That was a lovely radio voice that you have, Theo. And it was very nice to hear that voice. So we don't have Mairead Maeve with us yet, have we? She said that she might not be able to make it because of some commitments. So the next poet we have with us is Attracta Fahy. Hello, Attracta.
Oh, hi.
Hello. So let me say just a few words about you, that you were the winner of the Trocaire Poetry Island Poetry Competition in 2021, and also of the Irish Times New Irish Writing in 2019. And Attracta's poems have been published in many magazines, for instance, in Poetry Island Review, Stinging Fly, many others. Also, they have been collected in anthologies, just to mention one of Mouth, Northern Women's Writings. And more recently, the publisher Fly on the Wall Poetry published her best-selling debut chapbook collection, Dinner in the Fields, in March 2020. So Attracta, whenever you are ready.
Thank you very much, Manuela, and thank you, Giselle and Laura and Catra. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a privilege to be included in this wonderful project, and particularly with writers I admire. I'm shaken here because so many poets here that I love their work. And I just want to say, I suppose for myself, that I'm reading a poem that Yvonne chose for Poetry Ireland Review 125. And I just wanted to read that poem because for me, I had just started in my mid-50s to write. I'd always written in a journal, but I thought I'll see if I can learn the craft here and write something significant. And because she chose that poem, it was it's like a papal blessing, you know. It was like, it was given permission to a woman later in life and older to write something that might have meaning for somebody else. And I think I suppose maybe that's what I'm saying today, that I represent that part of the feminine that she tried to encourage. And my poem is called Encounters. Encounters. Staring at the long queue of silent people, staring at blank, wounded faces who gaze, staring past grimaced facades in lifeless bodies, staring with fear that haunts look-away smiles, staring into a mauve shabby purse that's almost empty, staring back at a clouded window that reflects my age, staring down at pleated bills I'm trying to pay, staring through the aloof woman in the distance, staring at those who once were friends, staring at my iPhone photos of my children, staring grateful for the rich life of my handbag. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Attracta. It's an impressive inventory poem with all that repetition of an aphorism and the very, very moving one as well. How about our guests, Mary O'Donnell? She's not here yet. Giselle, would you like me to read a Galician poem in Galician by Mariela Alexandre? Because some our guests might be wondering about the difference between Portuguese and Galician. You know, they are languages of the same family, and there are some important differences in the pronunciation. But let's see if you can understand and follow the idea. I chose this poem by Mariela Alexandre because it's about the daughter-mother relationship that Yvonne Boland herself delved into, even though here we have a reproachful daughter complaining about the mother's role. So here it is. The title is Derrotas Domésticas, and it says, debeu ser muy difícil degolar as anguías sen cortar os dedos, arrandearte para que non te cubrisen as escamas do ollo mol, liscar do no corredío das sabas. Nas noites opacas que batallas contra os garabanzos medrando disformes na auga, que absurda tarefa. Escoller lentellas de arroz, que impotencia. Cando o leite fervido vai por fora, inevitablemente. Ese o batifundo das tixolas non che deixaba oír a música. Se o teu francés e alemán eran inútiles contra a graxa nos fogóns, se os tubos de auga berran como nenos ou gaivotas e as patacas se pegan no fondo da tarteira, nai, como é que estás sorrindo nas fotos? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manuela, for the Galician version, the poem by Alexandre, Mariela Alexandre. So now I think we can move on to a Brazilian poet, our next poet, José Uguenin, who is my colleague in university. He teaches physics, but he's a poet, a novelist, a prose writer. He's published for the Revista Brasileira from the Academy of Letters in Brazil, and he's the current president of the Academy of Letters in Volta Redonda. Uguenin, you have the word.
Thank you, Gisele. Thank you very much. I appreciate so much the opportunity to be here. It's a great pleasure to be part of this volume of ABEI Journal in honor to the great poet Ivan Poland. I was very impressed by the life and her history and his poetry. It was all this admiration that I tried to put into the poem. Then, em português, poema para Ivan Bulan. Nascida em meio a palavras diplomáticas e tintas, a arte foi desde cedo presente. Criança, cruzou o mundo, entre os sotaques londrino e nova-iorquino viveu. Uma mulher sem país se tornaria, mas adolescente volta ao seu. A Irlanda, de Yeats e Joyce, volta para estudar. E ainda estudante nos dá seus primeiros poemas. Mas nesse tempo as palavras mulheres e poetas mantinham distâncias extremas. Sua voz interior, finta em sua própria imagem, faz nos versos o universo feminino aflorar. Rostos e mortes de crianças, painéis de lavadoras, vida caseira, doenças, violência no lar, coisas que a poesia, como ela dizia, não ousava nominar. Do diálogo com a tradição não se esquivava, brindava com poetas, abria caminhos para a mulher se expressar. Mulher, esposa e mãe, como poetizar? Uma jornada com 2 mapas inicia. Mas a cartografia é uma ciência limitada e as coisas da mulher irlandesa, do mundo, passam a ser vistas na poesia. E se pensas que foi fácil essa efeméride, não sabes que em tempos de violência ela viveu. Lições de objetos nos deixou, contra a poesia do amor ela escreveu. Mas tanto amor à vida e aos sonhos, seus versos carregam em cima. A quem sua jornada suceder. O tempo não tem sombras na montanha. Não foi neutra na guerra da mulher. A todos encantou com seu talento. Sua estética e poética demonstrou que a mulher pode ser o que quiser. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, do we have Mary O'Donnell or Mev there with us? No? So we can pass on the word to Mariela. Is Mariela here?
Yes, Gisele, I'm here. I also had some issues with my computer, and then I had my cell phone, and now finally I have my computer on. So thank you all. I have been following practically the whole session, and I'm so happy for being here. Firstly, of course, I would like to thank you all, but especially Gisele, Manuela, and Laura, who have organized this gathering. And I can only imagine what a dream it would be to be with all of you in person. So despite being online, it's such a privilege to be here. And since Boland's, and of course Rachel, not to mention Rachel, who is a key supporter to Irish studies in Brazil, the consulate, the embassy, and especially Rachel, who is so passionate about Irish literature, and now, of course, Brazil and Brazilian culture. So I'm very happy for Rachel to be here as well. And of course, since Boland's untimely passing, I have been in touch with Gisele about organizing this volume to commemorate her work, whose importance does not need to be stated. And although this is a pre-launch, because we are finishing, we are in the final editions and revisions, I can only imagine Manuela and Gisele's tireless work in putting everything together and organizing such an impressive volume that shows Boland from so many different perspectives. And with, of course, with Laura as a general editor, I've read all the articles, all the translations, all the poets, and can only attest to the beauty of the whole picture. And I'm sure that all of you will enjoy the final product. And I would also like to underscore, of course, the importance that has already been stated here about the translations for Irish Brazilian studies. We are also organizing a webinar with the translators for us to talk about the translations and challenges, and so it would be, of course, when we have this all ready, we will contact you as well. So we're very happy to do this. And finally, it's such an honor, and I'm so happy personally to see so many familiar faces. Moya, Celia, Elaine, who has been here. Many of you have been here in Brazil, so it's really lovely to be with you all. So I would like to conclude with my most heartfelt thanks, and I'm sure that you are all very eager to see the final volume, and that it will be soon available. And I am, of course, hope you will all spread the word and make in your own circles for us to make not only, of course, even Boland's work out there, but also the ABEI journal, whose, of course, international support is very, very important. So thank you.
Thank you, Mariana, the president of ABEI, of this Brazilian Association of Irish Studies, and for all your work together with Victor and with all our team, Esther, and all our students who are so enthusiastically supporting Irish studies here in Brazil. So thanks a lot for your presence, all the poets here, and of course, translators and authors that have accompanied this session. And we will do another one as this is a pre-launch, and it is a great honor to do this pre-launch at Poesia Meio with the poets themselves, but then we will have another one through ABEI, the association, who will do another session with the translators and authors, and also with the poets who are able to join us for the final launch of the journal. Thanks a lot. I will stop recording, and if you like to stay in the room to continue chatting, it will be really a great pleasure. And thanks a lot, Gisele and Manuela, again, for making this possible. It is really an impressive, special number for all of us around the world, as you said at the very beginning. Thanks a lot. I will stop recording.
Thank you.
It will never turn up.